One of the more memorable moments throughout Bleach was when Ichigo immediately panicked upon hearing Aizen's announcement that he was invading Karakura Town, only for he and his soldiers to be greeted by various members of the 13 Court Guard squads and even the Vizards. A similar moment can be found later on in Naruto's War Arc, when after he completely runs through Gaara's 4th Division with Wood Style and his Tenkai Shinsei, the Five Kage unexpectedly come together to take a united stand against Madara Uchiha. While both groups did eventually fall to Aizen and Madara, I thought it would make for a pretty interesting scenario switching their places, as I've done before with Obito and Gin. So today I'm going to be putting Madara Uchiha in Aizen's position and seeing how he stacks up against the members of the Gotei 13. We'll specifically be covering Edo Tensei Madara with the Rinnegan, mostly because it's my favorite iteration of him, but also because that's specifically the Madara that fought the Five Kage. For the Gotei 13, we'll be going over those considered captains around the time of fake Karakura Town, or really just the people who were shown to be captains in chapter 81 of the manga when Ichigo first invades the Soul Society, since we're just swapping Madara and Aizen's places and those were the captains at the time. With that out of the way, we can move on now to go over the Gotei first and how strong each of the captains are, or how they should compare to each other in speed. Though the strength of the captains varies greatly, they all at the bare minimum have good showings against the Espada, who I have discussed extensively on my channel, namely in the predecessor to this video, Can Obito Beat All the Espada, which you can watch here. But to keep things brief for the sake of returning viewers, each of the Espada, regardless of their rank, are stated to be able to destroy Las Noches by using a Gran Racero within the canopy, and the top 4 Espada specifically are forbidden from going into the Resurrection release states because it will yield similar results. Neliel states that it takes 3 days to walk from one side of Las Noches to the other, which makes it the size of a country when calculating normal human walking speed, let alone the potential travel speed of superhuman death gods. With every captain fighting an Espada or another Espada tier opponent, each of them at the bare minimum should be capable of outputting country levels of force, but this is the floor for each of them, and some of them have even better showings. Like head captain Yamamoto, who is going to destroy the Soul Society planet from simply initiating his Bankai and standing around, with Yamamoto declared to be the strongest of the Gotei on numerous occasions, both in the data books and throughout several statements in the story, saying things like his Zanpakuto, Ryujin Jaka, having the strongest defensive power in Soul Society history. Though Yamamoto is on an entirely different tier of power from the other captains, so much so that Ukitake considers him to be transcendent in just his Shikai release, the other captains still have good showings or compare to their War Arc feats even at this point in the story. Like Kiraku Shunsui, who fights pretty well against the leader of the Schutzstaffel Lele Baro in both his base form and with his Quincy Volt standing, with the Schutzstaffel being considered to be unrivaled among the Sternritter, meaning captains like Shunsui and Ukitake, who are often considered to be relative, should compare to showings from weaker Quincy like Grimmy, who summons a meteor that could destroy the Serite with power up to the multi-continental ranges when using the anime and calculating its force of impact using the earthquake formula. Some of the Espada also reach these higher ends with certain calculations of attacks like Ulquiorra's Lanza del Rampago, reaching up to 223 petatons of TNT, or what is similarly considered to be multi-continental. Various other captains have scaling far beyond the likes of the Espada as well, like Byakuya and Kenpachi, who fight with Yami, the strongest Espada, then have enough strength left to fight each other afterwards. Komomura also fights with Tosen, a former captain along with Gin, who are both implied to be beyond the Espada by Aizen, when he says the Espada were unworthy of fighting under him, then calls for Gin and Tosen, implying that they are worthy in comparison to the Arankar. There are other showings that could maybe get a few of the captains a bit higher, like Azashiro and Kenpachi's fight in Spirits Are Forever With You, where the two clashing could have potentially destroyed the walls of the Dangai, but this mostly depends on where you scale the size of the Dangai itself. There is this scan in French saying it's a hyperspace, but this is actually a mistranslation, with the Canon Memories of Nobody movie that this panel relates to simply referring to the Dangai as a dimension, which can vary in size. There is also Ichigo's standoff against the Sogyoku, which some state to be planetary through Aizen's posthumous letter saying that Toshiro intends to destroy the Soul Society. However, not only is Aizen blatantly lying throughout this letter, so it would be somewhat dishonest to cherry pick this one part of the letter as true, but it also says that Toshiro only intends to do this. I intend to take your mother out for a nice steak dinner, but simply because I intend it doesn't mean I will achieve it or that it is even possible. The statement is also incredibly vague, as it doesn't say whether or not its base power of 1 million Zanpakuto or its power when it is increased by several dozens of times is what's required to destroy the Soul Society. But I address this argument at at even further length in my Naruto vs Ichigo video, which you can watch here. With that being said, every captain should at the bare minimum be capable of outputting country to continental levels of force at this point, with some of the stronger captains on the higher end potentially reaching up to multi-continental levels of power if you go down certain pixel scaling and calcing routes, and Yamamoto, the strongest among them, definitively being a planet buster through threatening the Soul Society with his Bankai. To briefly go over the captain's speed, light speed is fairly consistent even for this Arrancar arc period of the story, as characters like Nanao, who is just a lieutenant and doesn't even have a Zanpakuto, yet is still capable of reacting to Lille Baro in his Volt Standig, where he becomes a pure body of light to the point where he is intangible, also utilizing light-based attacks with her reacting to him on numerous occasions. Nanao is in no way a powerful character, as she is easily soul-crushed by base Yamamoto and says that base Shunsui Shunpo is too fast for her when they separate themselves to fight him. During their fight in the Soul Society arc, Kenpachi says that Ichigo is on the level of a lieutenant even before he gets stronger through learning Zangetsu's name. Then the stronger Ichigo, even while weakened, is stated to have the spiritual pressure of a captain by Ukitake. This would mean that anyone who is comparable to the Shikai Ichigo all the way back in the Soul Society arc should be the speed of light. Other showings like the Stern Ritter who can dodge the Ashwaylan Light are also feats that the higher captains scale above, giving them some fairly impressive levels of speed, as the Ichigo who is relative to Byakuya on Sogyoku Hill should be far faster than the Ichigo on the bridge even in Shikai, but also by potentially upwards of 5 through 10 times if we take Yoruichi saying Bankai is a 5 through 10 times increase in combat ability into account, and Ichigo's Bankai is stated specifically to enhance his speed. But then the Arrancar arc gives us characters that would utterly annihilate this Ichigo and blitz him potentially dozens of times over, like some of the higher end Espada including Yami and Ulquiorra. This puts some of the lower end captains at light speed using the bare minimum, with those that are more so in the middle of the pack comparing to the other captains like Byakuya at faster than light speeds, and those at the higher end, which would include captains like Aizen and Yamamoto, should be scaling to massively faster than light speeds. This is a character I've been waiting to talk about in some form on my channel for quite some time. Madara can be incredibly polarizing, but to me he's easily one of the best Naruto antagonists, if not antagonists in anime manga period. The amount of time Kishimoto spent crafting his character and preparing the story for his appearance in the manga gives him an overwhelming intimidation and intensity that makes him feel completely unbeatable. But Madara's qualities as a character is a topic of discussion for another video. Discourse surrounding Madara's physical capabilities usually comes from him comparing to the tailed beasts who are known for annihilating mountains, or even characters like Inoki who destroy island-sized turtles, but characters like Madara exist on an entirely different tier, as he is known for being among the strongest to live during the Warring States period in Naruto's history and being a direct rival to the first Hokage Hashirama, replicating feats of this level by simply unsheathing the sword of his perfect Susanoo and stating that the Biju are no equal to him, even creating the Valley of the End through the collateral damage of his fight with Hashirama. This would scale Madara above what each of them are capable of, which would include showings like Killer Bee and KCM2 Naruto potentially producing a Biju bomb with upwards of multi-continental tiers of power visible from the curvature of the earth, or just the half of the Nine-Tails power inside Naruto stated to be capable of turning the world to ash, and both Madara and Hashirama contending with its full unrestricted power, Hashirama in particular fighting both Madara and the majestic attire Susanoo Nine-Tails at the same time. This could mean that the Nine-Tails is capable of destroying the planet, which isn't that far-fetched considering other statements saying its Biju bombs have an earth-shattering power, or the Ten-Tails producing energy equivalent to that of a small planet and being hailed as the end of all things in the data books. While Madara's lower range estimates can range widely depending on how you decide to calculate his Tengai Shinsei or other showings from the Biju, multi-continental to planetary tiers of force should be his bare minimum when taking how Madara scales to the full power of the Nine-Tails and the Ten-Tails into consideration. The speed of Naruto characters at this point can also vary widely, with massively hypersonic speeds being fairly common among shinobi like Kakashi, capable of cutting through lightning as just a younger genin. And most of the stronger fighters throughout even the earliest points in part 1 capable of completely dominating this Kakashi, with light speeds then making its way into the story, as a severely weakened Itachi is capable of reacting to Sasuke's Kirin, stated to close in on its opponents at the speed of light, or Darui's laser circus that manipulates light rays in the atmosphere, which both Sasuke at the Kage Summit and even Madara himself can react to later on in the war, absorbing it. These showings later on get overshadowed by characters like KCM Naruto, who can outspeed the Raikage that Sasuke was struggling to react to, then goes on to get even faster as he masters Kurama's chakra and achieves KCM2. This Naruto is incapable of amplifying his speed from KCM1 by potentially up to thousands of times when taking into consideration that he was able to divide his chakra by thousands of members of the Shinobi Alliance to make them all 3 times faster than Kakashi, with Madara reacting to a blitz attempt from Naruto and characters even weaker than Madara like White Mask Obito moving at comparable speeds to this Naruto and reacting to him as well. Madara scaling above characters like KCM Naruto, Itachi, and Sasuke should easily put him at faster than light ranges of speed, but him reacting to the likes of KCM2 Naruto and being a rival to Hashirama, who has similar or greater reserves of chakra than KCM2 Naruto, should put him into the ranges of massively faster than light speeds, as Naruto should be more than capable of using the chakra he gave the Shinobi Alliance to amplify his own stats, which could potentially put him at hundreds or even thousands of times faster than light, depending on how you do the math. Before we can get into our fight, I apologize, but we do have to cover this same tired old topic, and that is the fact that Naruto characters, especially at the strength of Madara or above, can both see and interact with Bleach characters or spirits in general. Weaker characters like Orochimaru can both see the god of death, his own soul, and essentially play a tug of war against Hiruzen and the death god for his soul, escaping with only losing his arms. Later on in the war, KCM Naruto is also capable of grabbing as well as perceiving his own soul against Nagato, as well as Rinnegan Sasuke being able to see Madara's limbo clones that exist on an entirely different plane of reality, let alone Bleach characters who are simply invisible spirits, meaning that Madara should be more than capable of seeing or at least sensing and fighting the captains. Now starting off with each of the different matchups, we can sort of begin to compare how each of the captains' varied abilities and physical stats compare to Madara individually and what their win cons could look like. The lower end captains such as Soifan or Toshiro aren't really much of a problem. Nigeki Kisatsu or Soifan's 2 hits of death Shikai could be scary, but she's too slow to ever hit Madara with it twice. Soifan is known for her speed, as she is now the leader of the Onmitsukido stealth force and was brought up under Yoruichi's tutelage, with her lieutenant Omaida even going as far as to say she's the fastest among the 13 court guard squads. But this statement, however, is not only questionable, as Omaida's full knowledge regarding the other captains is up for debate, but this is also somewhat contradicted as well by other statements or showings later, where Soifan loses to the same Yoruichi in the Soul Society arc, who claims that no one on the bridge could have beaten Byakuya, potentially including herself, or when Yamamoto compliments Shunsui on his Shunpo, then begins to describe how both he and Ukitake are in a class of their own directly following. She also explains how her Shikai works to her opponents in character, doing this with both Yoruichi and Giovega, in which case Madara will react to and attack her accordingly if he perceives the Shikai as a threat. And Soifan doesn't really have the showings to say she'd put up that good of a physical fight or last very long against Madara either. 10th Company Captain Toshiro Hitsugaya is a similar case where he doesn't have many impressive feats compared to the others of his rank, but even outside of this, he also gets naturally countered by Madara as he has an ice-based Zanpakuto and Madara is an avid fire style user, as are most Uchiha, more than likely melting his ice away with ease. We also know that Toshiro has this elemental disadvantage from when Yamamoto first activates his Bankai, and Kangdu can no longer use Hyorinmaru after stealing it due to the heat. Moving on to captains that are more so in the middle give or take like Komamura, Tosen, Kenpachi, or Byakuya, 9th Company Captain Kaname Tosen's Bankai is fairly easy to counter for someone with Madara's abilities, as Kenpachi while trapped in the Bankai says he can't see, smell, or hear, yet he is still able to move, dodge, and attack Tosen within it. With this being the case, all Madara really has to do is swing the sword of his Susanoo around and Tosen is essentially done for, as not only does Madara have better speed and better sensing with the Rinnegan than the Soul Society or Kenpachi that can reach Tosen even while blinded and robbed of his senses, but Madara is much stronger than him as well, and Tosen doesn't really have access to any of his better abilities due to losing his captaincy by the time he achieves Holification and Resurrection, meaning it wouldn't apply to the Tosen we're using here. 12th Company Captain Mayuri Kurotsuchi is a unique matchup where he's certainly on the weaker side among the other captains, but he is still more than capable of contending with or even beating people stronger than him. This is typically a result of his usage of various poisons or manipulating the bodies of both himself and occasionally his opponents. We see this when Mayuri alters Xylopero's perception of time and his senses using drugs after he consumes Nemu, and in his battle against Pernida later on. And in his battle against Pernida later on in the war arc as well. It's a fairly commonly accepted idea that Mayuri doesn't really train or necessarily get stronger, as he more so prefers to continue modifying his own body and his Zanpakuto, so it's weird to compare him to someone else physically, especially someone like Madara with an Edo Tensei body that isn't necessarily alive and can probably regenerate from any damage or alterations done to it. I'm not saying Mayuri can't win or that he doesn't have any contingencies for someone with this sort of body outside of the regenerating Pernida consuming Nemu, but it's just something we haven't seen on screen, so we wouldn't really know. But Madara has the speed to absorb him if he isn't able to kill him for some reason nonetheless. 7th Company Captain Komamura Sajin's Shikai and Bankai is something that Madara easily counters with his Susanoo, as he is more so relative to someone like Tozen before he uses the Resurrection and conceding inferiority to Shikai Aizen, meaning Madara's Susanoo, especially if in its perfect state, should be more than enough, and honestly I'd argue it's nothing he can't potentially handle himself, as he is seen on screen fighting and controlling Biju up to the power of the 9 tails, which Komamura unfortunately does not compare to. Captain of 6th Company Byakuya Kuchiki and Captain of 11th Kenpachi Zaraki are similar in the sense that they're more so power-based fighters. Byakuya is described as a Kido master and does use Kido spells in tandem with his Shikai and Bankai, but neither have the power or speed to contend with Madara at this point. Speed itself is particularly important to Byakuya, as he specifically has to be able to catch his targets with both his Shikai and Bankai Senbonzakura Kageyoshi. Kenpachi is subconsciously suppressed at this point in the fight against the Arrancar, and he could be much stronger, and you could try to argue that he would unsuppress himself over the course of the fight, similarly to what occurred during his battle with Unohana, but this is specifically because she was healing Kenpachi every time she killed him, with him getting stronger every time he came back from being close to death, which then leads us into the higher captains like 4th Company's Unohana. During this period of the story, she is hiding her true capabilities that she does reveal in the Thousand Year Blood War, but will obviously be using her full power for this scenario. Her Shikai is mostly focused around healing and functions somewhat similarly to the Naraka path of the Rinnegan with the King of Hell, but her Bankai is a different case entirely, creating a mist of a blood-soaked battlefield around she and her opponent, allowing her to utilize the blood surrounding them for both offense and defense, most notable of which is her accelerated healing without the use of Kaido. Still though, she is susceptible to fatal injuries, as Kenpachi kills her with this Bankai active and states that she is weaker than this Kenpachi in just his base form, without any of the power of his newfound Shikai and eventual Bankai. While she is arguably the first of the captains to be relative to Madara in speed, her abilities outside of her healing aren't really much to write home about, and her attack potency being only vaguely above the Espada but still below the likes of Yamamoto and Shikai Aizen means a similar fate to those before her awaits her as well. Even if you argue that whatever Madara does to her, whether it be his Susanoo, ninjutsu, or his raw physicals, that she would heal from it, keep fighting, and he could never kill her, as I mentioned for Mayuri before her, the human path of the Rinnegan that can absorb souls could bypass this healing if it ever became a problem by simply absorbing Unohana. The same is true for Captain of Squad 13 Jushiro Ukitake. If his Sogyo no Kotowari's reflecting ever became an issue, though Ukitake is already too frail with pretty bad showings regarding stamina and endurance due to his illness to ever put up a decent fight. Ukitake's equal and Captain of Squad 8 Kiraku Shunsui can be more of a problem when using his games that he explains the rules of in character, so both he and Madara, who also likes to see what his opponents can do or test their abilities, may actually play these games for a while, which could be pretty funny to watch. But Shunsui runs into a major problem where his games can indeed be reacted to. We see both Stark and Lele Barra do this after he explains their rules to them, then they play along with him. The same, however, is not true for Shunsui's Bankai, which consists of a performance of 3 acts. First being to transfer any damage from himself to his opponents, second is to infect them with an incurable Reiatsu-based sickness, and third is placing the both of them in an inescapable pit of sea until one of them dies from having their spiritual pressure exhausted. The only problem is that not only does Madara's Edo Tensei body allow him to regenerate from any damage Shunsui could do with either of his games or the first act of his Bankai, but Madara also has no spiritual pressure for the third act of his Bankai to drain in the first place, meaning it would just kill Shunsui, and there isn't really anything he could do, as Madara's Edo physiology hard counters him even if he managed to actually tag him. Shunsui's Bankai also may catch other captains around him if he uses it, as implied when he wonders if the others have gotten far enough away for him to use it yet, and when he apologizes to Nanao in case she gets dragged into this, meaning that Shunsui activating his Bankai does not give him any win conditions, but also may kill other captains around in the process. Third Company Captain Genichi Maru is one of those characters where it's somewhat difficult to properly determine just how strong he should realistically be, as he has lied to just about everyone regarding how strong he is or what his Zanpakuto can actually do. He does imply while thinking to himself that he is weaker than Shikai Aizen before he merges with the Hogyoku. However, his Bankai is also shown capable of killing third Fusion Aizen to the point that he is forced to further evolve with the Hogyoku in order to save his life, despite Aizen stating earlier that he can suppress the abilities of those with a weaker spiritual pressure than himself. While Gin's Bankai is stronger than Madara and we don't really know how the poison would affect his Edo Tensei body, the raw physical damage such as the hole he put in Aizen isn't anything his Edo Tensei regeneration shouldn't be able to deal with, and considering that Gin's physical body is weaker than the likes of both Shikai Aizen and Yamamoto, he himself also gets dealt with fairly quickly, either by a regular fight or absorption. Captain of 5th Company Sosuke Aizen is an interesting case. He is stronger than pretty much every other captain I've mentioned so far, even saying that Yamamoto is the only captain with any real ability and only takes any real precautions for Yamamoto, despite others like Shunsui and Unohana being present in the battle. He is still weaker than Yamamoto, as this is just Captain Aizen without being merged with or even in possession of the Hogyoku, as by the time he betrays the Soul Society and makes his departure, he is no longer considered a captain. Captain Aizen should be just as strong as he is against the captains and visors, however, considering that he beat them before his merger with the Hogyoku, still making this an interesting matchup. While Aizen isn't quite as powerful as someone like Yamamoto yet, he still has good speeds, with both he and Madara utilizing illusions as well, and being two of the more hacks-based characters in their respective series. Many claim that Aizen could trap Madara under Kyokusugetsu's illusions and that would be the end of it, but Madara does have the capacity to resist these illusions, as the Sharingan is stated to, quote, enable its users to penetrate and see the reality behind any illusion or spell, and to reflect the power of the magics they penetrate back onto those who cast them. This statement also just refers to the base 3 Tomoe Sharingan, let alone a Mangekyo or the fully developed Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan that Madara has, meaning that Kyokusugetsu simply won't do anything for Aizen here. You could argue that Sharingan-based Genjutsu won't work on Aizen either, since he sort of just figured out how Shinji's Shikai illusions work, but Aizen himself states that Shinji's illusions just aren't as good as Kyokusugetsu's, which is more comparable to Sharingan-based Genjutsu. Without the two of them using their illusions, Madara should still take this with little trouble, as he is still stronger than Aizen. Even if you believe that Aizen is as strong as Yamamoto even as just a captain and without the Hogyoku, their relative stats don't prevent Madara from simply absorbing Aizen without much trouble if he tags him. This is still an Aizen who is not yet at his full power, however, not merged with the Hogyoku in his fusion states where he transcends both Hollows and Soul Reapers, and the same is true for Madara, as his Edo Tensei state is debatably his weakest, even with the imps from the Rinnegan, let alone Madara later on as the Ten Tails Jinchuriki and with his third eye. If you want to see what a fight between the two of them at their full capacity looks like, then you'll have to ask for the Madara vs Aizen video. Yamamoto being the first captain to compare to Madara in strength makes this fairly interesting, especially going over his extraordinarily powerful Bankai divided into 4 directions. Zankan Otachi East concentrates all of his fire into the tip of his Zanpaku toe, annihilating everything it touches without a trace. Zankan Otachi West then follows up by wrapping Yamamoto's body in flames reaching up to 15 million degrees, making him untouchable. Zankan Otachi South revives those slain by Yamamoto and uses them as foot soldiers chasing his opponents until that target turns into a pile of ash, creating an army potentially up to the trillions. And finally, Zankan Otachi North somewhat replicates the effects of East, destroying all that it touches with a single swing. Yamamoto's Shikai is also fairly powerful in its own right, but I think once he sees the other captains going down at an alarming rate, he'd be willing to start off with his Bankai like he does against fake Yuha in the first invasion, even though no one other than Chojuro had really died yet. Madara should be able to react to Zankan Otachi East and North with their similar speed, and even if he does get hit, it's nothing his Edo Tensei regeneration can't handle, or potentially something he could block with his Susanoo, depending on how you interpret things moving past the Susanoo such as Gaara Sand. West also isn't much of a problem, as Madara can utilize his Genjutsu if Yamamoto can't be touched, which he does in character. I've discussed several times at length across my videos about how Sharingan-based Genjutsu does in fact work on those without chakra. We see this when the Infinite Tsukuyomi can trap animals who don't have chakra like cats, who have existed long before Kaguya ate the chakra fruit. This alongside other showings like Hebi Sasuke, someone with a Sharingan nowhere near as potent as Madara's Eternal Mangekyo, being able to put Manda, a sage creature that only has nature energy, under a Genjutsu and control him with his eyes, meaning it should work on Yamamoto or really any of the other captains that Madara could deem to be a waste of time. Yamamoto also somewhat implies that he is vulnerable to or wary of illusions, as is evident when he admits to Aizen that against him he doesn't trust anything he can see or even touch, but he instead can discern that it is Aizen in front of him due to the feel of his spiritual pressure, which Madara doesn't have. South is similarly a non-issue, as the dead soldiers are quite literally skeletons and get destroyed fairly easily. Yamamoto is their best chance against Madara, as the others are simply too weak or too slow by comparison, or Madara has a direct counter to their abilities that could be tricky in this scenario we are putting him in. This is also just Madara himself, without considering things like his Limbo clones that exist on entirely different dimensions that can also use Susanoo and presumably have access to his Rinnegan abilities as well, alongside the fact that he could easily make dozens of clones to fight each of the captains. I also only mentioned genjutsu in a case where Madara physically cannot make contact with an opponent, such as Yamamoto with Zanka no Tachi West, but each of the captains individually are also notably wary of Aizen's Kyokusuigetsu illusions, to the point that Unohana thinks that Ichigo is their best chance against Aizen solely because he's never seen Kyokusuigetsu's release, which they were eventually fooled and beaten by. All in all, nearly each of the captains are easily outclassed physically or countered by Madara's abilities, with the two captains who stand a fairly good chance being Yamamoto, who is relative to Madara in physical stats, and it could go either way, or potentially Mayuri if he had prep time or some kind of crazy new device he's been waiting to test. Who knows? With that being said, that's about all I have for you today. I have quite a bit of other Bleach and Naruto content for you to check out if you're interested, such as the predecessor to this video, Ken Obito be all the Espada, and I plan to make more Bleach and more Naruto and Boruto content in the future. Potentially an Aizen versus the Hokages video, since I don't really think Aizen versus the Five Kage is really fair or all that entertaining. But subscribe for free to be notified of my future projects, such as when I upload or stream. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like to support the channel, as well as let me know that this is the type of content you want to see. Feel free to let me know if I missed anything or if you would like that Madara vs Aizen video in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, and have a blessed day.